A young girl disappeared during a quiet Sunday visit to the local market, gone in just minutes. For 2 long years, there were no answers. But then, a shocking discovery inside a loaf of bread turned everything upside down. Jennifer Walsh sat in a small, windowless interview room at the Oakdale Police Department, a place that had become all too familiar. The pale green walls and constant flicker of fluorescent lights had become part of her routine. Across from her sat Detective Martinez, the same investigator who'd been by her side since day one. He still carried his notepad, though they hadn't had a new lead in months. With visible exhaustion, Jennifer repeated what she'd said countless times before. "We got to the market around 9. Sophie was excited. She'd been counting down the days all week." Her voice was hollow, the words worn smooth by repetition. She recalled how her daughter had asked to browse the nearby stalls alone, just for a moment, to look at a bracelet stand. Jennifer agreed, just a few steps away while she paid for produce. But when she looked up, Sophie was gone. No scream, no sound, just vanished. Martinez listened quietly, his pen unmoving. He'd heard it all before, but he knew how important every word was to her. Jennifer's gaze drifted to the wall, her voice growing quieter. She was so happy that morning, rambling about the Moonstone Chronicles, trying to guess what would happen next. I can still hear her talking about Princess Aria. Her words faltered. Martinez gave her a moment, then gently said, "I know it's painful, but sometimes going through it again reveals something new." Jennifer nodded, though deep down she didn't believe that anymore. They'd already reviewed every second of that morning, interviewed every vendor, traced every footstep. Still, nothing. He slid a folder across the table, another stack of follow-ups from officers who hadn't given up hope. Flyers had gone out again last month. A few people called in, but none of the tips had gone anywhere. Jennifer didn't react. She'd learned not to. Inside the folder were the same photos she'd memorized. Sophie, just before everything changed. That frozen smile sent a familiar ache through her chest. "We're still searching," Martinez said, his tone firm but measured. They both knew the odds. After 2 years, most missing child cases don't end the way families hope. Jennifer reached into her own bag and pulled out a worn notebook. Its pages were filled with cross-referenced notes, maps, and observations, her personal investigation. Before all this, she was a school librarian, methodical, precise. She had poured that same energy into chasing even the smallest lead. "There was that delivery driver," she said, flipping to a page. "He thought he saw someone who looked like Sophie near Westlake Park." Her finger traced the neat writing. "I went there every day last week. Nothing. But what if she was just passing through? What if we widen the radius?" Martinez didn't interrupt. He admired her resolve, though he knew how much it had taken from her. She hadn't returned to work. Friends drifted away. Sophie's case had become her entire world. "We'll check it out," he said. Then, a sound pierced the quiet room. Jennifer's special phone, the number printed on every flyer, every poster, every plea for help, started ringing. Her hand trembled as she reached for it. After hundreds of silent days, something in her eyes sparked again. "Hello?" she answered, voice steady. Martinez sat up straighter, watching closely. Jennifer's face shifted from cautious hope to sheer disbelief. Her skin went pale as she listened, one hand tightening on the edge of the table until her knuckles turned white. "You found what?" she whispered. Detective Martinez leaned forward, instantly alert. "I'll be right there," Jennifer said, her voice suddenly steady as she ended the call. Then, slowly, she looked up at him. That was Brenda Collins. She's a 5th grade teacher just a few blocks from here. She said she found Sophie's bracelet inside a loaf of bread. Minutes later, Jennifer gripped the steering wheel, following Martinez's cruiser through the quiet streets of Oakdale. The town looked unchanged, peaceful, familiar, but her mind was racing. She'd been here before, too many times, chasing down leads that went nowhere. There was the so-called psychic who claimed Sophie was somewhere near water, the tip from a shopping mall that turned out to be a completely different child, and that cruel anonymous call demanding money in exchange for fake information. But this felt different. Brenda's voice hadn't sounded speculative or desperate. It sounded shocked. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the neighborhood. Rows of modest ranch-style homes with trimmed lawns and kids' bikes left in driveways. It was the kind of place where people felt safe. Jennifer used to believe in that kind of safety. They pulled up to a small yellow house with white trim. Jennifer recognized it. She'd been here once, years ago, for a school event. That was before her calendar filled with police meetings and searches instead of parent-teacher nights. Before they could knock, Brenda opened the door. Her face was pale, eyes filled with worry. As a teacher at Oakdale Elementary, she had known Sophie well. "Jennifer," she said softly, gently placing a hand on her arm. "Detective, I'm glad you came quickly." Jennifer stepped inside. The familiar scent of chalk and art supplies clung to the air, a teacher's house through and through. Behind her, Martinez entered silently, his calm presence grounding. The house was tidy, but lived in. Stacks of graded papers covered the table. Student artwork lined the hallway walls. One watercolor in particular stopped Jennifer in her tracks, a multicolored dragon soaring above a castle. Sophie had painted it. Her chest tightened. "In the kitchen," Brenda said, leading them past the living room. "I was just making lunch." Her voice trailed off. They stepped into the kitchen. On the counter sat a wooden cutting board with a partially sliced loaf of bread. A bread knife rested beside it, the blade still catching the overhead light. Jennifer's eyes narrowed as she stepped closer. Something was embedded in the cut face of the loaf. Beads, blue and purple, and just barely visible between them, a heart-shaped amethyst. Jennifer's breath caught in her throat. She didn't need to hold it. She knew. It was Sophie's bracelet, the one she'd given her daughter for her 10th birthday, the same one Sophie wore the day she vanished, clearly visible in the market photos from that morning. "I was slicing the bread and hit something hard," Brenda said, her voice trembling. "At first, I thought it was just a weird part of the dough, but then I saw the beads. I recognized the pendant." She looked at Jennifer, wide-eyed. "I remember her wearing it in class." Jennifer instinctively reached for it, but Martinez gently caught her wrist. "We need to preserve everything exactly as it is," he said quietly. He took out his phone and began photographing the loaf from every angle. Then, carefully, using gloves, he lifted the bracelet from the bread. Remarkably, it was almost untouched. The pendant and beads had survived the baking process. The cord, slightly discolored, was made of a heat-resistant material, possibly explaining how it made it through intact. Jennifer sank into a kitchen chair, her hands still gripping the edge of the table as tears spilled down her cheeks. In a whisper, she confirmed to Martinez. This was without question Sophie's bracelet. Brenda explained she had bought the bread the previous evening from Franklin's Bakery on Main Street, a beloved local shop that had been in the community for generations. "Do you still have the bag it came in?" Martinez asked. Brenda nodded and pulled a paper wrapper from her recycling bin. White, with gold lettering, the name Franklin's Bakery across the front, a timestamp from yesterday. Jennifer stared at the bracelet now sealed in the evidence bag. How could this end up here, after 2 years?" she whispered. Martinez placed the bag down gently and said, "We'll get it tested, but if this is what we think it is, we might finally be getting closer." His voice was firm now, steadier than before. "This is the first solid lead we've had in Sophie's case. We're heading to Franklin's Bakery. Now. Jennifer nodded, already standing. After 2 years of working closely with detectives, she understood how these things worked. But this time, she wasn't staying behind. "I'm coming with you," she said quietly. It wasn't a request. Martinez considered stopping her but saw the determination in her eyes. "Then stay close," he replied, "and let me do the talking." They arrived at Franklin's bakery just before noon. Jennifer sat inside Martinez's unmarked police car parked across the street. The familiar scent of fresh bread drifted through the open window, once comforting, now making her stomach churn. The bakery was just as she remembered, a red brick building with a striped awning, gold lettering on the window, and rows of pastries displayed like artwork. Plainclothes officers entered first, while uniformed police established a quiet perimeter outside. Jennifer watched as Martinez stepped inside and approached an older man behind the counter, George Franklin, the longtime owner and baker. George appeared calm, cooperative, pointing toward the back of the shop as they spoke. Time crawled. Jennifer's thoughts spiraled. She'd handed out flyers here 2 years ago. She remembered George, kind, soft-spoken, generous. He even donated bread to the early search teams. Could that same man have anything to do with what happened to her daughter? She didn't want to believe it. But how else could Sophie's bracelet have ended up in a loaf of bread? Was it placed there deliberately? Did it get there by accident? The possibilities multiplied. Could it have happened at the bakery? At the distribution center? During transport? How many hands had touched that dough before it ended up on Brenda's kitchen counter? Jennifer watched officers inside the bakery methodically go through the kitchen, speaking with a young cashier she didn't recognize. One officer took photos through the open swinging door. Nothing about their movements looked urgent, thorough, but calm. Outside, a few neighbors had gathered near the perimeter, watching quietly. Some with concern, others with uncomfortable curiosity. Jennifer shrank down in her seat. Since Sophie disappeared, she'd become the face of a tragedy no one wanted to talk about, yet no one could ignore. Some people avoided her. Others offered sympathy in hushed tones. The isolation had been almost as unbearable as the loss. Nearly 2 hours passed before Martinez finally returned. He opened the driver's side door and slid into his seat. His clothes smelled faintly of flour and yeast. "They didn't find anything suspicious inside," he said, voice low. Franklin was shocked. He cooperated fully, showed us receipts, supplier information, said he gets pre-made dough from a distribution company that serves bakeries across the region. Jennifer's heart sank. So the bracelet could have ended up in the dough before it even got here? Martinez nodded. Midwest Baking Distribution. They supply to at least 30 bakeries in 3 states. He called them right in front of us, tried to help trace the origin, but it just made things more complicated. Jennifer stared at the cheery storefront across the street. What about Franklin himself? Anything odd? No red flags, Martinez said. No record, no past complaints. He's been running that bakery for over 3 decades. Honestly, I believe him. Jennifer looked away, her gaze fixed on the streets they both knew so well. Only now they felt unfamiliar. So, what happens next? We process the bracelet officially, he replied as he started the car. Then we get in touch with the distribution center, request records, see who handled that batch. Look for anyone who might have a history, anyone connected to Sophie or cases like hers. The car pulled away from the bakery, and the streets of Oakdale rolled past the window. It was spring. The same season Sophie vanished. The same flowers bloomed in the same flower beds. The same gentle sun filtered through the trees. But everything else had changed. At the station, Jennifer sat in a plastic chair beneath the cold glare of fluorescent lights, watching silently through the observation window. On the other side of the glass, forensic technicians were carefully photographing, measuring, and swabbing every part of Sophie's bracelet. What was once a simple gift, a birthday present, was now treated like vital evidence. Every few minutes, one of the technicians would glance up at her, their expression a blend of professional focus and quiet sympathy. After nearly an hour, Detective Martinez returned with paperwork. "Since the bracelet belongs to you," he explained gently, "you're allowed to take it home, but we may need to examine it again." Jennifer signed the forms without hesitation and accepted the evidence bag. Holding it in her hands felt both comforting and unbearable. A link to her missing daughter, and a brutal reminder that they were still so far from answers. The ride home was quiet. Martinez promised to contact her immediately with any updates from the distribution center. As they pulled up to her house, the sun had already begun to sink behind the trees, casting long shadows across her yard. Flyers and catalogs spilled from her mailbox. A porch light she'd left on that morning now glowed faintly in the evening dusk. Jennifer thanked him softly, stepped out of the car, and walked up the drive alone. She unlocked the door and leaned against it after it closed behind her, trying to absorb the weight of the day. The bracelet felt heavier now than it ever had. She walked into the living room and lowered herself onto the sofa. The house was quiet, the air conditioner humming in the background like white noise. She placed the evidence bag on the coffee table and just stared at it. Inside the clear plastic, the purple heart-shaped pendant seemed to shimmer under the overhead light. It was her daughter's, no doubt. The very same bracelet Sophie wore the morning she vanished. The fact that it had resurfaced after 2 years should have filled her with hope, but instead, it left her with more questions than answers. Jennifer stood and made her way to the back of the house. She opened the door to what had once been her home office, but now it was something entirely different. Her sister called it the War Room. Maps of Oakdale and the surrounding areas lined the walls, peppered with colored pins and red string connecting key locations. A corkboard displayed a detailed timeline, interviews, sightings, tips, each one recorded on a labeled index card, newspaper clippings, case reports, even stories of other missing children, all organized, all archived. Stacks of missing flyers were piled neatly on the desk. Binders full of notes and statements filled a bookshelf. The room was dim, lit only by a single desk lamp casting long shadows across the cluttered workspace. Jennifer flipped on the overhead light and moved toward the largest map. Her fingers brushed across the red string connecting the Sunday market to various locations Sophie used to visit. Her middle school, the lake, her favorite park. Franklin's bakery was marked, but only as a distribution point for flyers. It had never been tied to any real theory until now. She stared at it for a long moment, then circled it in red marker. No new lines, no new conclusions. Just a new question at the end of a long chain of maybes. Then the house phone rang. The shrill sound jolted her from her thoughts. She rushed to the kitchen, heart pounding. Maybe it was Martinez with an update, but as she picked up the receiver, she already knew who it was. "Jen, it's me," came her sister's voice. Jennifer hesitated. "Something happened," she said. "Something big." She told Karen everything. The bracelet found in the loaf of bread, the trip to Franklin's, and the frustrating dead end with the distributor. Karen was silent until Jennifer described the moment she recognized Sophie's bracelet, still embedded in the crust. "That's incredible," Karen breathed. Then, quietly, "Do you think she's alive?" The question settled over the line like fog. "I don't know," Jennifer whispered, "but this means something. It has to." They ended the call with Karen promising to check in again and urging Jennifer to eat something. Instead, she returned to the war room. On the desk was an old photo album, the last pictures from the day Sophie disappeared. Jennifer hadn't opened it in months. The pain of seeing her daughter's smiling face, frozen in time, had become too much to bear. But tonight, with a real clue finally in hand, she forced herself to look. Page by page, she studied every image, not just Sophie, but everything around her. The market, the people in the background, the stalls, the shadows. She wasn't just remembering anymore. She was looking, searching for something she hadn't noticed before. The market had been busy that day, crowded, distracting, and somewhere in that chaos, something had happened. That Sunday morning had been bustling. Dozens of vendors filled the market, selling everything from fresh fruits to handmade jewelry. Jennifer flipped through the photo album, reliving that day one snapshot at a time. There was Sophie examining a bouquet of flowers. Another photo showed the two of them sharing a pastry, Sophie laughing with her mouth full, her braces glinting in the sun. And then, a picture that made Jennifer sit up straight. Sophie stood in her turquoise dress, smiling wide, holding a small wicker basket filled with pastries. Her purple and blue bracelet was clearly visible on her wrist. But it wasn't Sophie who caught Jennifer's attention this time. It was the man standing just behind her, wearing a white baker's cap and arranging bread on a table covered in sunflower print cloths, was George Franklin. Jennifer's breath caught. The same man who had stood in his bakery earlier that day, calmly showing police his supplier documentation. There he was, in the background of her photo, just feet away from Sophie. She didn't remember the police ever mentioning Franklin as a witness back when the investigation first began. Had anyone even asked him what he'd seen that morning? Jennifer quickly grabbed her notebook and scribbled down the observation, circling it multiple times. She then flipped through more photos, now scanning every background with fresh eyes. And there he was again, once near the flower stall. Again, as Jennifer and Sophie walked past the bread display. 3 photos, 3 moments. One man, always close to Sophie. Jennifer's stomach turned. Yes, it might be coincidence. Franklin's bakery had always had a booth at the Sunday market, but after Sophie's bracelet was just found in one of his loaves 2 years later, it was no longer something she could ignore. She moved to her computer and typed in his name. The bakery's website was basic, dated. Just a few lines saying it had served Oakdale for over 3 decades, owned by George Franklin, a third-generation baker. Nothing more. She checked social media. There was a business page with a few images of bread and cakes, but no personal accounts, no photos of the man himself, no posts. It struck her as unusual. In today's world, even the most private people usually left some sort of digital trace. But George Franklin seemed to exist only behind the counter of his bakery. Jennifer leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. Could Franklin have seen something that day? Something critical? Could he have been overlooked during the original investigation? Not out of malice, but because no one ever thought to ask. Should she call Martinez with this? Would he even take it seriously? She wanted to believe this wasn't just coincidence. But all she had was a photograph, and a very unsettling feeling in her chest. Jennifer made a decision. She would go talk to Franklin herself, casually, see if he remembered anything, maybe something that didn't seem important at the time. And maybe, just maybe, he could explain how her daughter's bracelet ended up in his bread. She checked the clock. It was almost 9 p.m. Too late for a visit, but bakeries started early, really early. She'd go first thing in the morning. Jennifer set her alarm for 5:30 a.m. and tried to sleep, but it didn't come. She tossed, she turned. The photos kept replaying in her mind. Sophie smiling, the bracelet, and George Franklin always somewhere close by. Her thoughts circled endlessly. At 2:17 a.m., she gave up. She knew most bakers started work long before sunrise. If Franklin was like the others, he'd already be there. On impulse, Jennifer got dressed, grabbed her keys, and drove downtown. Oakdale was asleep. Streetlights bathed the empty sidewalks in soft yellow. Even the bars had long closed. The only vehicle she passed was a police cruiser, which slowed briefly as it spotted her before continuing on its patrol. As she pulled up across from Franklin's bakery, she saw it. Light. The closed sign still hung in the window, but the interior glowed faintly. He was there, Jennifer parked the car and stared at the building, heart pounding, knowing this moment might finally bring her closer to the truth. Jennifer stood on the sidewalk, heart pounding. She knew this was impulsive, maybe even reckless, but after everything that had happened in the last 24 hours, caution was no longer her top priority. She needed answers. Through the bakery's front windows, she saw movement near the back. A figure moved steadily between counters, presumably Franklin, but from this distance, she couldn't make out what he was doing. Taking a breath, Jennifer crossed the street and approached the entrance. As she reached the door, a smaller side one, likely used for deliveries, suddenly opened. George Franklin stepped out, carrying a black trash bag. He was wearing the same white baker's uniform she recognized from the photos, now dusted with flour and shadowed by the dim glow of early morning lights. He stopped mid-step when he saw her standing there. "We're closed," he called, his voice rough from early hours. "Not open till 6. Jennifer stepped closer, into the light. "Mr. Franklin, I'm Jennifer Walsh, Sophie Walsh's mother. I was hoping I could speak with you." His expression changed instantly. That unmistakable look of recognition. Jennifer had seen it so many times before, the moment someone realized who she was, not by name, but by her loss. Franklin hesitated, glanced back at the door, then quietly set the trash bag down by the dumpster. He approached slowly, wiping his hands on his apron. "Mrs. Walsh, this is a strange hour." "I know," she said. "I couldn't sleep. I remembered that bakers start early. I just needed to ask you something." Her voice was calm, but every word cost her effort. He softened slightly. "The police were here earlier, about the bracelet. I told them. I don't know how it got there. I get my dough from Midwest Distribution. It didn't happen here." "I understand," she said gently. "But I've been looking through photos from the day Sophie went missing. And I saw you at the market. Your stall was right behind where she was last seen." Franklin looked thoughtful, then reached for the door. "Come inside," he said. "It's cold out here. I've got coffee." Jennifer hesitated for just a second, then followed him into the warm glow of the bakery. The scent of rising bread hit her immediately, once comforting, now bittersweet. Sophie had always loved that smell. Franklin motioned toward a small table in the front. "Have a seat. I'll get you something hot." He disappeared briefly, returning with 2 mugs of coffee and a small plate of steaming rolls. "Just out of the oven," he said, setting them down. "Thank you," Jennifer murmured, wrapping her hands around the cup. She didn't feel like eating, but she needed to stay steady. "Mr. Franklin, were you ever formally interviewed after Sophie disappeared?" He sat across from her, cradling his own mug. "Briefly," he said. "They spoke to most of the vendors. I told them the truth. I didn't see anything. It was a busy day. Lots of foot traffic." Jennifer nodded. She pulled out her phone and opened the photo she'd found earlier. She handed it across the table. "This is from that morning," she said, pointing. "That's Sophie, and that's you, just behind her stall." Franklin studied the photo, then shook his head with a tired expression. "I remember her. Yes, sweet girl, always polite. But I don't remember anything unusual that day." As they talked, Jennifer's eyes wandered and caught on a small bookshelf near the employee area. The titles were hard to read at first, but then she recognized something that made her pulse jump. The Moonstone Chronicles. It was the exact fantasy series Sophie had been obsessed with before she vanished. A niche series, not something you'd find on most shelves. Jennifer had to special order them from a store 2 towns over. She pointed toward the books. "My daughter loved those, obsessed with Princess Aria. It's not a well-known series." Franklin looked up, surprised. "Really?" he said. "I just picked those up at a library sale. I read all kinds of things. Fantasy helps pass the time during the slow hours." Jennifer smiled gently. "Sophie's favorite was Aria. Who's yours?" The question hung there, simple, casual. but crucial. Franklin shifted in his seat. "Oh, the boy with the sword," he said vaguely. "I liked him." Jennifer's expression didn't change, but something inside her tensed. There was no boy with a sword in that series. It followed a female lead from beginning to end. Anyone who'd read even one book would know that. Franklin seemed to realize he'd slipped. He quickly looked away, adjusting his apron. "I haven't actually gotten to them yet," he added. "Bought the whole set. Haven't had time." Then he stood suddenly. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Walsh, but I've got a lot to prepare before we open." The warmth in his voice was gone. Something had shifted. Jennifer stood too, carefully gathering her things. "Thank you for the coffee," she said quietly. Franklin nodded without meeting her eyes, already turning toward the kitchen. As Jennifer stepped outside, the early morning air hit her like a wave. Whatever just happened, it wasn't nothing. "The bake won't prep itself," Franklin said with a stiff nod. Jennifer got the message. She thanked him politely, apologized for showing up so late, and stepped outside into the cool, early morning air. But her thoughts were anything but calm. She slid into the driver's seat and closed the door, gripping the wheel with trembling hands. Her heart pounded as her mind spun. Sophie's bracelet turning up in Franklin's bread was already too strange. But now this? The same man, coincidentally, owned the exact obscure book series Sophie adored. Books that weren't sold in most stores and had to be specially ordered. And when she asked about them, he became visibly uncomfortable, offering a vague answer that didn't line up. Jennifer reached for her phone, ready to call Detective Martinez, but paused. What would she even say? That a man owning the same books as her daughter felt suspicious? That he stumbled over a basic question about them? It wasn't proof of anything. Still, the combination of events didn't feel random. She left a voicemail for Martinez anyway, carefully explaining what had happened. The books, his odd reaction, and the eerie overlap with Sophie's life. "These weren't just any books," she said. "I had to order them from out of town." He said he hadn't read them, but clearly he didn't even know what they were about. She ended the message with a quiet plea. "Call me back as soon as you can." Jennifer considered driving home, but something told her to wait, just one more hour. She wanted to see if anything else unusual happened. From her car across the street, she kept watch on the bakery. Franklin moved back and forth inside, kneading dough, checking the ovens, arranging loaves onto racks. He looked like any other baker, going about a quiet morning routine. But at 3:30 a.m., something changed. Franklin stepped out of the side door again, this time carrying small, wrapped packages. Jennifer watched as he opened the trunk of an older model sedan parked beside the building and placed them inside. 15 minutes later, he came out with another package and added it to the load. Then, 20 minutes after that, he appeared again, this time with nothing in his hands. He locked the side door behind him and walked down the alley beside the building, heading toward a smaller structure Jennifer hadn't noticed before. It was set back behind the bakery, half hidden behind a cluster of dumpsters, a weathered shed with a slanted metal roof, roughly the size of a one-car garage. Franklin checked over his shoulder, looking in both directions before unlocking the door and slipping inside. Jennifer's breath caught. There was something secretive in the way he moved, like a man trying not to be seen. Not like someone grabbing flour or trays. This felt deliberate, careful. She watched the building, heart racing. 10 minutes later, Franklin came out. He locked the door behind him, this time with a visible tension in his posture, then returned to the bakery, moving faster than before. Jennifer's suspicion deepened. During the police visit earlier, she hadn't seen anyone check that outbuilding. And if Franklin was hiding something, that would be the place. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it held old receipts or backup supplies. But what if it didn't? What if there was something inside that could finally explain how Sophie's bracelet ended up in a loaf of bread? She knew the right thing was to wait for Martinez. Let the police handle it. But what if she waited, and whatever was in that shed was gone by morning? She made a decision. Once Franklin was back inside and the street was still, Jennifer stepped out of her car. The quiet of the town felt sharper now, every footstep echoing faintly as she moved through the alley. The shed looked even older up close, faded wood siding, rusted hinges, but it matched the architecture of the bakery, probably built decades ago. The door was locked tight, but a small side window offered a narrow view inside. Jennifer carefully lifted her phone and shielded the flashlight under her fingers, casting a dim beam through the glass. At first, the space looked ordinary, shelves of flour, baking tools, storage bins, but then she saw something that didn't fit. A door, not part of the original structure, newer, bright white, clean paint, and in stark contrast to the weathered interior around it. More importantly, it had a keypad lock. Jennifer's breath caught. Why would a simple storage room need high-tech security? What could possibly be behind that door that required a code lock? She shifted, trying to get a better angle, but the narrow window made it impossible to see further. Any other approach would mean trespassing and possibly damaging evidence. Reluctantly, she stepped away from the shed and made her way back to the car, the silence of the early morning now feeling dense and electric. She sat behind the wheel again, heart pounding harder than ever. She no longer had just a feeling. She had a reason to believe something important was hidden in that bakery's past. From her vantage point across the street, Jennifer kept watch. The bakery lights remained on, casting a warm, misleading glow into the still dark town. Franklin moved in and out of view, his silhouette crossing behind the windows as he continued prepping for the morning rush. Then, at 4:15 a.m., he reappeared, stepping out the side door again, this time holding a tray covered with a cloth. He walked briskly to the small outbuilding in the back, unlocked the door, and vanished inside. He stayed longer this time, nearly 20 minutes by Jennifer's count, before returning to the main bakery, this time empty-handed. Just after 5 a.m., he exited once again, looking around cautiously before heading straight back to the storage building. He wasn't carrying anything, but the way he moved, careful, tense, set off every alarm in Jennifer's mind. The moment he disappeared inside, she made her move. Staying in the shadows, she crept closer to the small side window, the same one she had looked through earlier, but now the keypad-secured door inside the shed was open. Jennifer's breath caught. There was another room, hidden, tucked behind what looked like ordinary shelves of flour and supplies. From her limited angle, she saw only part of it, a small cot pushed against the wall, and a table with a lamp casting a pale circle of light. And then it hit her. This wasn't storage. It was a room, a hidden living space. Jennifer's heart pounded so hard she thought she might faint. Could Sophie be in there? Could her daughter have been here this whole time, just blocks away? She leaned closer, trying to see more, but Franklin's body blocked most of her view. She heard voices, muffled, one low and sharp, his, the other softer, frightened, familiar. Jennifer stumbled back to her car, her hands trembling so badly she could barely dial Martinez again. Still no answer, straight to voicemail. What could she even say? That she saw a hidden room in a shed? That she thought the voice inside might be her daughter's? She hovered over the idea of calling 911, but doubt stopped her. She had no proof, no visible threat, just her gut, and a fear that making a wrong move might cost her everything. So she waited, watching, hoping. A few minutes passed. Then, unable to stay still, Jennifer left her car again. She needed to hear what was happening, needed to be sure. She returned to the side of the shed, crouched low beneath the window, and listened. Inside, Franklin's voice rose, sharp, angry. "I trusted you," he snapped, "after everything I've done for you." Then another voice responded, higher pitched, quieter, trembling. A voice that made Jennifer's breath catch. "I don't understand," the girl said softly. Jennifer froze. Her heart skipped. That voice, the rhythm, the softness. Could it be? "Don't play innocent with me," Franklin snarled. Jennifer peeked through the window. Franklin was pacing the room, furious. He slammed something down on the table. Not food, not flour, a printout. From what she could see, it looked like an email, a notice, a warning. She heard him say it, and her world tilted. Someone found a bracelet in one of the loaves today, a purple heart, with blue beads. The police came here, with your mother. "My mom?" the girl echoed, her voice cracking. "She was here?" Jennifer's breath caught in her chest. It was her. It had to be Sophie. The voice had changed, older now, but the cadence, the vulnerability, it was her. Jennifer knew it. "You put that bracelet in the dough when I wasn't looking," Franklin growled, his voice quieter now, more dangerous. No, it was an accident," the girl said quickly. "I didn't mean to. It must have fallen when I was helping." "Liar!" he roared. Jennifer watched as he swept his arm across the table, knocking everything to the ground. The crash echoed inside the tiny space. 2 years, he shouted. 2 years I've given you everything, and this is how you repay me? Jennifer shifted desperately, trying to see past him. Then, for a second, the girl stepped sideways, backing away, and Jennifer saw her face. Her knees almost gave out. Long brown hair, glasses, taller now, her face thinner, but the shape of her eyes, the way she shrank into herself when afraid. It was Sophie. Jennifer clamped a hand over her mouth to stifle a sob. Her daughter was alive, and had been just minutes from home this entire time. The wave of emotion was overwhelming, part joy, part terror. Inside the shed, Franklin ran his hands through his hair, pacing like a man unraveling. "That's it," he muttered. Jennifer's blood turned cold. Whatever was about to happen next, she couldn't wait. She had to act. "We're done here," Franklin said flatly. "It's too risky to keep you now." He pulled a set of keys from his pocket. "You have 5 minutes. Grab what you need. We're leaving tonight, somewhere no one will ever find us." "No, please," Sophie pleaded, her voice breaking as she backed away. "I don't want to go." "This isn't a discussion," Franklin snapped. 5 minutes, or we leave with nothing." Outside, Jennifer stood frozen, horrified. It was true. Sophie had been held here, hidden in that room for 2 years, and now Franklin was planning to disappear with her. Her hands trembling, she pulled out her phone and dialed Martinez again. This time, he picked up on the first ring. "Detective Martinez." "It's Jennifer Walsh," she whispered urgently. "I found her. I found Sophie. She's alive. She's in a room behind the bakery, a hidden space in the storage building. He's getting ready to take her. He's packing the van now." "Jennifer, slow down. Where exactly are you?" "I'm outside the shed, behind Franklin's bakery," she said, her voice quick with panic. "He's got a room hidden inside. I saw Sophie. She's in there. He's taking her. Please, he's going to run." "Do not approach," Martinez said sharply. "Stay hidden. We're dispatching units right now. I'll be there in less than 5 minutes." Jennifer crouched low, eyes locked on the window. Inside, Franklin was forcing Sophie to shove items into a backpack. "Hurry," she whispered. "Units are on the way," Martinez confirmed. "Stay hidden. Don't engage. If he sees you—" "I understand," she said. "Just please get here fast. He's moving her now." Jennifer's heart pounded. She could feel every second slipping away. Then she heard sirens, faint, still distant, but coming. Franklin didn't wait. He yanked Sophie by the arm, dragging her out the side door of the storage building. "We need to be gone before anyone notices," he snapped, pulling her across the lot. "Please don't do this," Sophie begged, her voice rising into the pre-dawn silence. "I want to go home." "You lost that chance," Franklin hissed. "You gave it up when you dropped that bracelet in the dough." "You took me," Sophie cried. "You took me from my mom." "I saved you," Franklin snapped. "She wouldn't understand you. Not like I do. Who got you your favorite books? Who gave you a safe space? I protected you." But the sirens were closer now. Franklin's head jerked toward the sound. He cursed under his breath, his grip tightening as he pushed Sophie toward the van. "Get in! Now!" Jennifer knew she couldn't wait another second. If he got in that van, they'd vanish. Ignoring Martinez's warning, she stepped out from the shadows. "Sophie!" The name cracked in her throat like a shot. Franklin stopped cold. Sophie's head turned, her eyes wide. "Mom!" she breathed, her voice barely a whisper. "Get in the van!" Franklin barked, yanking her arm. "Let her go," Jennifer said, stepping closer. "The police are on their way. It's over." "She's mine now," Franklin growled, trying to pull Sophie toward the van. "You'll never understand what we have." Sophie twisted in his grip, reaching for Jennifer. "Mom!" she cried. Jennifer surged forward, pure instinct taking over. She grabbed Sophie's hand, held it tightly. "Let go of her!" Franklin yelled. "She belongs with me! She's my daughter!" Jennifer shouted, clinging to Sophie as the girl sobbed, trembling. Then, flashing red and blue, tires screeching, police vehicles swarmed the alley, officers leaping from their cruisers. "Police! Don't move!" one shouted, weapon drawn. Franklin panicked. He shoved Jennifer hard, trying to pull Sophie away, but Jennifer didn't let go. When he realized he couldn't break their grip, Franklin bolted for the van. He made it 3 steps. 2 officers tackled him hard, slamming him to the ground. He struggled, yelling incoherently, but within seconds, he was cuffed. Jennifer fell to her knees, wrapping Sophie in her arms as the girl collapsed into her shoulder, sobbing. "I tried to escape," Sophie whispered. "So many times, I tried." "You're safe now," Jennifer said, stroking her daughter's hair. "I've got you. You're safe." Detective Martinez arrived seconds later, his expression a mixture of awe and relief. "I told you to wait," he said, half stern, half amazed. "He was going to take her," Jennifer replied, still holding Sophie like she might vanish again. Martinez nodded. No anger, just understanding. He crouched beside them. "Hi, Sophie," he said gently. "I'm Detective Martinez. I've been looking for you a long time." Paramedics arrived and began examining Sophie as Jennifer held her hand tightly, refusing to let go. "She appears physically okay," one EMT said. "But we recommend full evaluation at the hospital." "I want to go home," Sophie whispered. "You will," Jennifer promised softly. "We'll stop at the hospital first. They just want to make sure you're all right. And the officers need to ask you some questions." She squeezed Sophie's hand. "Then, we're going home. We just want to get everything documented while it's fresh," Martinez said gently as paramedics completed their assessment. "I promise we'll keep it brief for now." Sophie clung to her mother's side as they were escorted into a police cruiser. The drive to the station passed in a blur, Jennifer unable to take her eyes off her daughter. She studied Sophie's face, afraid that if she blinked, she might vanish again. Sophie looked different, still her daughter, but older in ways that had nothing to do with time. Her face carried a quiet weight, a shadow that no child should bear. At the station, Martinez ushered them in through a side entrance, avoiding the swarm of reporters already gathering at the front, tipped off by scanner traffic about a missing child found alive after 2 years. They were led to a softer interview room. No metal tables, no cold chairs, just a small, quiet space with dim lights, a box of tissues, and bottled water. Martinez had made sure of that. Jennifer sat beside Sophie, one arm protectively draped around her shoulders. Her fingers never stopped moving, brushing her daughter's hair, tracing her back, grounding herself in the miracle of her presence. Martinez sat across from them, notebook open, but his voice was calm and warm. Sophie, still wrapped in a blanket, clutched a cup of hot chocolate with both hands. Her fingers trembled slightly, but her voice was steady. She began to speak. She told them how Franklin had approached her at the Sunday market, how he told her there'd been an accident, that her mother was hurt, and that he'd been sent to take her to the hospital. "By the time I realized we weren't going to the hospital," she said quietly, "we were already at the bakery." He locked her in the hidden room behind the storage building. "He said you didn't want me anymore," Sophie added, glancing at her mom. "That you were glad I was gone." Jennifer made a strangled sound and squeezed Sophie's hand. "I didn't believe him," Sophie said. "Not really, but he took my phone. I couldn't get out. The door had a code. The window was too small. And he said, if I ever tried to escape, he'd hurt you." Martinez leaned in gently. "How did the bracelet end up in the bread?" Sophie took a breath. "He made me help with the baking sometimes. When he wasn't looking, I dropped it in the dough. I remembered what Mom used to tell me about leaving clues if I was ever lost." Jennifer's eyes flooded with tears. She had taught Sophie that when she was 6, and her daughter had remembered and used it. "I didn't know if it would work," Sophie said. "I thought maybe it would melt in the oven, or nobody would ever see it, but I had to try." Jennifer stared at her in awe. "Sophie," she whispered, "that was so brave, so smart." Sophie looked at her, a small flicker of the girl she used to be shining through. "I wasn't sure it wouldn't melt, but I remembered you said the heart was amethyst, and the beads were glass, and the cord, it was some kind of special fiber." Jennifer smiled through her tears, remembering the day she'd explained that to Sophie when she had begged for that bracelet in a shop window. "Oh, honey," she said, wrapping her arms around her again. "You were incredible." Martinez nodded. "That one act, Sophie, that's what brought you home." As the interview continued, the full extent of Franklin's deception came to light. To the world, he was a quiet, respected baker, but in secret, he had isolated Sophie, convincing himself he was her savior. "He kept giving me those Moonstone books," Sophie said. "Said they proved he knew me better than anyone." She paused. "He got mad when I told him I'd already read them all." Jennifer learned how her daughter had been confined for nearly 2 years, let out only to help in the bakery when no one was around, given food and clothes, but denied freedom, friends, and a voice. And through it all, Sophie had survived. Not just survived, fought, thought, waited for her moment, and made it count. Martinez eventually closed his notebook. "We'll need a full statement later," he said, "but this is more than enough for now." Police had already seized Franklin's computer from the bakery and uncovered deeply disturbing evidence of his obsession with Sophie. "Will I have to see him again?" Sophie asked quietly. "In court?" Martinez shook his head. "We're doing everything we can to avoid that," he said. "He's already talking, hoping for a lighter sentence, but we have more than enough. We won't need you to testify." Sophie's shoulders relaxed. "Good," she whispered. "I never want to see him again." "You won't," Jennifer said, gently squeezing her hand. A police psychologist had already met briefly with Sophie, then pulled Jennifer aside. Recovery would take time. Sophie had lost 2 years from age 12 to 14, years when kids grow, change, connect. That gap couldn't be erased overnight. There would be hard days, therapy, setbacks, but the psychologist also saw something else in Sophie: resilience, unshakable, quiet strength, and brilliance in the way she found a way to speak. without words, by using a bracelet to shout, "I'm here." When they left the station, the morning sun had just begun to rise. Pale light washed across the parking lot, long shadows stretching toward the squad cars and sidewalks. Jennifer kept her arm wrapped around Sophie's thin shoulders, feeling her warmth, her breath, her life. The road ahead would be long. There would be pain and work and healing. But for the first time in 2 years, Jennifer's heart felt whole. Her daughter was coming home.